On the agenda tonight, we're going to be taking a look at Julian Lennon, and he's going to be singing Imagine, and we're going to be comparing Julian's voice to his dad's. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So, every once in a while, we get a request on the channel that is really specific. And this is one of those requests. It's going to be an interesting one as well, because Julian's voice is really similar to his dad's voice. And he said in the past that he would only perform Imagine, or at least it would be the end of the world for him to perform Imagine, because you can imagine, no pun intended, it being compared to or compared with, you know, John Lennon's voice, and people would, you know, try and maybe rip it apart and all that kind of stuff. It's always the problem when you've got a famous parent or somebody who's famous in the family, especially someone of John Lennon's fame, then doing something in music when you're staying in the same industry. What we're going to do is listen to Julian Lennon, and we've got Nuno Betancourt here on guitar as well, who also supplies some backing vocals. But we're going to have on screen as well the original vocal by John, so that we can compare the lines. But I will be jumping into this. If you want to listen to the songs independently, there will be links in the description below, so you guys can click on those. This is an analysis video, so we'll be jumping into it, but let's have a listen.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too.
Now I'm going to jump in here. So, with Julian's voice, I think probably it sits naturally a little bit lower, only by maybe a semitone, from his father's voice. And I know, of course, we're listening to a digital recording rather than analog, and you know the difference in the sound with the production as well. This is really stripped back. And the fact that when we take down the guitar, interestingly, the guitar is so different, obviously, to a piano. But with the piano on the original version, because of the expression pedal being held down, which means that the notes ring out for a long time after they're played, it's almost like the little semitone run that we hear gets resolved in a way, even though it's not being played, because you hear the root note of the chord, and this is in C, you hear the root note of the chord ringing out.
Imagine there's no heaven.
So that na 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 sounds a little bit more kind of resolved, and I don't know how much of it is just the ear and your brain filling in the gaps, but I think just because of the sound of the piano and the notes lasting for a longer time, it just has the impression of being resolved, even though it isn't. And on the guitar, obviously, we can hear quite clearly the notes aren't ringing over the top of each other, because you've got to leave your chord in order to play that little run. So it means that we get single notes of a run, then back to the chord. Getting back into the sound of the vocal when we're listening to John's voice, and I'm going to take down the piano.
See if you try.
We've also got this kind of try, a little bit of nasality, kind of pushing the sound forward. Not pushing the sound forward because it's just John's voice, but the tone of his voice is a little bit kind of softer because of being in that place rather than being in that place, which is more of a chesty sound. And I'd say that Julian's voice sounds a bit more chesty. Have a listen.
It's easy if you try.
Yeah, I mean, it is so similar here on the B3. It does go into more of a nasal place.
It's easy if you try.
It's easy if you try. It's really subtle, but it's definitely in there. This is Julian again.
No hell below us. Above us, only sky.
And we have quite a similar vibrato, even though I think that Julian's vibrato comes in more regularly than John's did, because John does end phrases quite quickly sometimes.
Above us, only sky.
Like there's no real discernible vibrato there. It's not sky, sky. There's no kind of wobble to it, but Julian tends to have more of that in his voice.
Only sky.
Sky. You can hear that wobble in there.
Imagine all the people.
And again, that wobble, and let's have a listen. I mean, I'm not going to be going through the whole song, listening to one phrase and then going back to John, but...
Imagine all the people.
Yeah, there we go. So, with John's voice, people, he kind of just slides off the mountain to what is the A3 here. And by the way, this is in the same key. So, that's not always a given that somebody's voice is in exactly the same place in order to sing a song in the same voice, with the same voice that the previous version was released. So you do get it quite a lot where singers will change the key to suit their voice, but here it's exactly the same key, so it means that the physiology is the same, the range is the same. And like I said, that's not, even from father to son, mother to daughter, it's not always a given. Let's listen on. This is now going to be John.
Living for today.
And interestingly here, with this this little line that John does, I don't think we have that from Julian, but let's just have a listen.
Imagine that.
Yeah, so we didn't do that there. But another thing that I love about this performance by Julian is that he hasn't used pitch correction, and he undoubtedly would have had the option to use it, because this isn't a performance from like 30 years ago. This is very recent, and the whole reason that he's singing this in the first place, I said about him mentioning that it would have to be the end of the world for him to sing this, and with the war in Ukraine and everything that's going on in the world, quite justifiably, he said, well, it is, getting to that point where it is the end of the world. So just to try to focus people's attention, he's performed this song. But anyway, going back to this point of singing it naturally, I love the fact that he didn't use pitch correction so that we can compare the voices authentically and accurately, because you're hearing the voice exactly as John sang when he performed it originally, and now we're hearing Julian's voice without the technology of the modern day industry, and getting to compare the two voices as they are. I mean, this is the problem with pitch correction, is that we're now replacing voices with a voice that didn't happen. So it's rare that we even get to do this, but it's great that Julian has decided to just sing it, because maybe with the modern day industry, there'd be so much pressure to pitch correct it, because, you know, he'll know that, oh, I'm going to be slightly sharp, I'm going to be slightly flat. But I mean, this is what art is all about. It's just performing and accepting it for what it is, because it's a unique piece of art, rather than making every piece of art the same. Ironically, that's what it means now. Singing naturally is unique. It is, pitch correction is the norm. So yeah, this is outside of the norm, but it's great, and it's the stronger for it.
There's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living a life in peace. You may.
So now here, this is what really does show the voices being in exactly the same place. When we go up to this G4, I mean, actually John, you can see, was quite sharp of that, but Julian was a lot more accurate pitch-wise, but you can hear how he's producing the sound when we go back. So, I mean, that first phrase that he missed out, he would have been able to do that because we can hear him doing it here. But listen to the way that he accesses it. I think it's actually, you know, I went to more of a kind of bluesy D flat there rather than the D4, which is what it is, we can see. But the way that he accesses that, going back to John, and it does sound a little bit double tracked there, but you can hear how he's going, he's doing exactly the same with his head voice. So this is a head voice that's got air in the sound. Kind of going up like that. It's not falsetto.
You may say I'm a dreamer.
And then back into, you may say I'm a dreamer. Now into, even though it's got a head voice quality to it, it's a lighter sound in chest voice. Let's now listen to Julian.
You may say I'm a dreamer.
Ah, wow, listen to that nasality there.
You may say,
hey, rather than you may say, hey, and having all of that, hey, it's in that kind of place, which is great. I mean, this is something that I guarantee you, Julian is not trying to place his vocal there. He's not thinking, oh, I've got to try and sound like my dad. This is just his physiology, the way that the voice, the sound, resonates in his head. So I've mentioned in other videos about the tone that you produce as a singer is dependent a lot. It depends a lot on your resonance chamber. So it's like with a guitar, when you're playing the guitar, an acoustic guitar, the body of the guitar is the resonance chamber. That's where the sound resonates and therefore increases in volume. So when you've got this resonance chamber of a head, everybody looks different. So it means that the resonance chamber is changing, so you get a slightly different sound. But it shows you how similar Julian is just physiologically to his dad, in the way that his bone structure is designed, that his voice is naturally pushing into the same places as it did with his dad's voice, with John Lennon's voice. So it's fascinating that that's how similar we're talking, not only the physiology of the chords, but the shape of the skull and the way that the sound waves are bouncing around there and then coming out and being, amplified effectively. Let's listen on.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us.
There we go. Listen to that A3. Day. Obviously, I'm exaggerating it there. The whole phrase was day, day. It was all in that nasal place.
I hope someday you'll...
Actually, day. It went more nasal here on the A3.
join us, and the world will be as one.
Yeah, I mean, this is great because I love hearing this kind of thing where...
You'll join us.
Join us. And he's kind of going down there. He's not going, join us. And you're not getting a weird pitch corrected sound, which would have happened lower in his range. If it was getting snapped to a line, it would sound weird. But it's just been allowed to go, ah, and go wherever it went, even if it wasn't hitting a note. So this is, yeah, what I love hitting now. I love hearing this kind of thing, because before I wouldn't have noticed it before pitch correction, but now listening to so many vocals that are pitch corrected, I'm now noticing bits of expression and just noises that happen that aren't pitch corrected, because you realise, oh yeah, I haven't heard that in about 20 years because everything's now stuck on lines.
Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man.
And you can see that, you know, Julian is really accurate pitch-wise in exactly the same way that his dad was, of hitting these lines now and again, but it's a natural voice, so it isn't always going to keep happening, but he's got that accuracy.
Imagine all the people sharing all the world.
And now we've got Nuno's backing vocal coming in, being added to Julian's.
You.
And, I mean, it seems like here, the that light G4 that we have going on, John is actually consistently sharp with that. And let me just have a listen to it. Yes, we get this, you know, he's quite, you know, dramatically sharp of the G4, getting close to, you can't really see it, but getting close to the G sharp. It's almost a semitone higher. So, yeah, he just overshoots that. And this is what happens if you have a jump, especially with a register change. If you're going, and you're kind of, I know that that's kind of a light head voice sound, even though it's where you would, where you'd have your chest voice, but going, and jumping up that high, when you've got, you know, a large distance to go, hitting that note right between the eyes is, yeah, a challenge. But again, it's just a natural voice, so John's slightly sharp, but Julian just hits it right between the eyes.
I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
And, I mean, there we have it. We are going to be just listening to John's vocal just for that last line.
And the world will live as one.
I mean, it's so similar when you kind of listen to that vibrato at the end as well. And now listening to Julian.
And the world will live as one.
It's almost one. It's kind of breathy, but that frequency, the frequency of vibrato is really similar, which, again, yeah, that's I mean, that's even more the case, that it's not going to be a given that the vibrato is going to line up. And I'll tell you what I'm going to try and do here. This might be beyond my technological abilities, but I'm going to try and move Julian's lines over. If we get this down, so you can see here how the vibrato of Julian's is sitting in between the peaks. So I mean, it's pretty much identical, the vibrato. Yeah, we're only talking a difference of milliseconds here. So when I say about it not being a given that vibrato is going to be the same, yeah, that's even more the case, because there are so many variations, so many potential speed differences in vibrato. There's every chance that Julian's natural voice might have gone, oh, where's one, and had that kind of vibrato, or one, or a faster, more uncontrolled vibrato, but it just is exactly the same as his dad's. So that's a huge part of it, because vibrato really is a singer's expression. It's something that we get so much from as listeners. So it's great that we can just put two voices next to each other and compare them. And this isn't a video saying, oh, one's better than the other. Like I said, that there's no better in music, because it's an art form and it's all subjective anyway. So it is interesting that in the past I've done a video on Yoko Ono, and she's singing Imagine as well. So we get to compare all three voices, if you wanted to, and I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video if you want to check out that performance. But the thing that Julian has in his voice that Yoko didn't have in her voice with her performance is this dynamic appreciation and the change in the vocal registers going into head voice and not keeping it all in chest voice. Julian goes up into his head voice. So, and we get that that kind of change to that lighter head voice sound, whereas Yoko went and it kind of did it in chest voice. She changed the key of it because her range, obviously being a female vocalist, was higher, so that's where it got transposed higher, but she still kept it in chest voice, whereas Julian's doing the same thing that John did, just going into that lighter head voice place, not because he's trying to do that on purpose, it's just where his voice sits. It's so naturally similar to John Lennon's voice, not only with vibrato, nasality, but literally the physiology of the way that the sound is bouncing around his head. These heads are very similar indeed, which obviously makes a lot of sense. One being the father, one being the son. But anyway, thank you guys for this very specific request to take a look at Julian Lennon's voice and compare it to his father's. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and keep those suggestions and requests coming. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys at the next one. Rock!